I'm Sarah Borkson-Keto, and in conjunction with Nareit's REIT World 2020 annual conference, I'm speaking today with Michael Bilerman, Managing Director at Citi. Michael, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you are this year's recipient of the Industry Achievement Award for your contributions to the REIT industry. What do you think in your career has been the most significant change within the industry?
Well, thank you, Sarah, and I'm so honored to be this year's award recipient. And I think when you think back the last quarter century of being in the REIT world, really the only constant has been change. And there are so many areas that I could point to. REITs being added to the S&P 500 back in the early 2000s, REITs being broken out as their own GIC sector in 2016, or just all the improved governance and diversity that we've had in our industry. But to me, the most significant change has been the property sector composition of the REIT index over time. And specifically, when you look at the traditional core real estate sectors, those have now become the minority of the sector to just 35% of the REIT index. And that was over 80% when I started my career well over 20 years ago. And if you look at the REIT index today, it's as diversified as it's ever been. And we have seen that significant reduction in the traditional core real estate sectors like office, retail, multifamily, industrial, towers, and a lot of new sectors being created. And so you've had the towers convert to REITs. Those stocks are now 20% of the REIT index. Infrastructure, timber, we've had new real estate sectors being created like data centers, single family rentals. The big casinos now are in REIT structures, the billboards, student housing. None of this existed back when I started in the 90s in the REIT industry. They were obviously around, but they weren't securitized into the public world. We've had a lot of M&A and spinoffs and IPOs, and obviously the sector and company performance has driven those changes in the composition of the industry. And so to me, it's been so rewarding watching the industry grow and change and get to meet new management teams and understand new property sectors.
What do you think about how REITs in general have responded to the twin health and economic crises caused by the pandemic?
Clearly no one wanted 2020 to be this way. And as difficult of a situation that this has become, both from the pandemic as well as the economic recession that we're going through, I think there are a handful of silver linings that we can look at of how the REITs have been able to handle this. And I'll break it up into two categories. The first being from a business perspective, the REITs are trying to make the best of a difficult situation. They are being extraordinarily transparent and communicative in terms of all of the impacts that the virus and the pandemic have been having. And, they're doing a lot of things from a business perspective in terms of managing their expense load, collecting the majority of their rents, entering into either deferral or abatement agreements that hopefully are beneficial to both sides. They're trying to advance as much of their tenant discussions, making their assets as safe as possible for their customers to come back to, and really trying to effectuate sound capital allocation decisions. But I think what really stands out for the REIT industry and a lot of the REITs is how they've been able to give back to their communities and to their employees. And I think there's so many great stories of REITs using their assets as testing sites, a massive amount of PP&E that they've been able to bring to their tenants as well as their employees, food banks for first responders, and so many other ways that the companies have used a pretty bad situation for good. And I know Nareit's been out there, highlighting some of the important things that the REITs have been doing. And look, we know it's not easy, and we certainly commend the industry and the CEOs and their management teams for their efforts to get through this.
Looking ahead, outside of COVID-specific issues, what do you think are some of the key factors that you'll be watching in terms of their impact on the REIT industry in 2021?
Well, I think it's really hard to say sort of outside of the COVID pandemic because by far the virus is the most important factor today and as we go into 2021. And not just for REITs, that's really just the global marketplace. We're all dealing with this virus, which is comforting in some ways that everyone's going through it together, but obviously very disconcerting because we have to get through this pandemic to be able to get to the other side. And I think if you think back to when we started coming into this pandemic, the economy was on pretty solid ground. I mean, it wasn't growing as fast as it was coming out of the GFC in the early 08-09 period, but we were in pretty good shape. And looking at it through that lens, as landlords to the broader economy, REITs will ultimately take their cue from how the economy performs from here. And so today's economy obviously is so tied to the duration and the severity of the pandemic. That's why we're spending all of our time trying to understand its impact. Now, there are other factors. I don't want to say that COVID is the only factor. It's just the most significant factor that's going to have the biggest impact in terms of company performance, company fundamentals, and ultimately stock price returns. So what else are we trying to understand? We're trying to understand the capital markets. What type of capital is available to REITs? What type of access do they have to that capital? What's their cost? We're looking at the private markets to see what private market investors are doing and transacting in. We're really spending a ton of time on operating fundamentals and what tenants are doing across each of the various property types that we're covering. We're really trying to get every piece of data, whether that data is observable in the public domain, if it's through our own survey work, if it's artificial intelligence, if it's the web scraping that we're doing. We're really just trying to pull together as many different data points. We're working with our colleagues globally to hear what they're seeing in their markets. And if markets are reopening, what lessons can we learn from those markets to help apply it here to the US and the stocks that we're covering. And we're really just trying to keep as informed as possible, and because REITs are the backbone of the economy effectively, right? That's what they own. We're just trying to be as educated as possible.
Finally, what does winning the Industry Achievement Award mean to you on a personal level?
I am extraordinarily gratified and extremely honored to be this year's industry award winner. And, I think you pull up the list of CEOs and industry professionals that have received this award in the past. And it's a pretty humbling experience because a lot of these people were people that mentored me, that I grew up looking at as icons in our industry. And to be now mentioned and listed alongside of them is extraordinarily, it is very humbling to be part of that, and to be recognized along them is truly a wonderful honor. And I'm really thankful to be included in that list. I remember when I took over the Citi franchise as the lead analyst in early 08, and one of my mentors mentioned to me that if I just surrounded myself with good people, good things would happen. And I really, truly believe that my own personal success is really driven by my colleagues and my teammates. And I'm a true believer in team. And I couldn't be more proud to share my own moment with them because it's really a reflection of their performance as much as it is mine. And I'm really just grateful not only for my teammates, but those who have mentored me over the years, and everybody that I've met in this industry that have given me both solicited and unsolicited feedback. And I'm just really excited to embark on the 24th year in the industry and see what the future holds.
Michael, thanks so much for joining me.
Great.
And for more news and information from REIT World, be sure to visit Nareit's website, reit.com.